As I mentioned earlier, on Friday, Gauteng Premier David Makhura updated the media on the status of the PPE and Covid-19 corruption investigations, announcing that a second official in the Provincial Department of Health has been suspended following findings made by the Special Investigations Unit. He's also announced that all other 10 MECs in Gauteng would undergo lifestyle audits at the behest of the SIU. To speak to us more about this, we're joined by political analyst Khanyi Magibane. Khanyi, thank you so much for joining us on Weekend Dawn. Always a pleasure chatting to you. An audit of the MECs, including David Makhura, the Premier. Is it a situation of too little, too late?
I'm afraid so. The call for corruption to be dealt with within government spheres, whether it's national, provincial, or local, has been ringing for a really long time. And the question is, why now? We have to question the timing. Of course, we know that what set this off is President Cyril Ramaphosa a few weeks ago addressing the nation, and right towards the end of his address, saying that he had signed a declaration into place ordering the Special Investigative Unit to investigate tender fraud, not just any tender fraud, but COVID-19 tender fraud. And as the details have started emerging, we've seen just the depth of what has been termed the tender bonanza. I mean, up to 102 companies have received contracts to the value of 2.2 billion rand. And what the Premier announced yesterday is that a case had been opened against 3 of those companies. Now, in your opening intro, you mentioned that 2 officials from the Gauteng Health Department had been implicated in enabling the corruption. And it's the position that they hold that we must be very worried about. The one is the Chief Financial Officer and the one is a Chief Director. So we are seeing that it's not just the paper pushers on the grounds that are being instructed in a particular way, but it's really influential officials within the department. And that then again brings into question the pressure or duress that some of these officials were acting under. Health Minister Masuku has said that he's got nothing to do with procurement. However, he is a very influential figure within the department, of course, being the principal of the department. And so questions have to be asked, Jacob, in terms of the chain. You know, it's a syndicate, it's a network, it's a way that it works. You know, one person has to instruct another for these corrupt contracts to be awarded. And so, I mean, the Premier has said that there will be weekly updates, so we'll see what will come out of those updates. But I think what people are looking for right now is accountability. We want to see prosecutions. We want to see money returned to the public, because I think that's what's really going to convince us that the wheels, of justice are really starting to turn. Otherwise, it's just going to be another talk show.
Khanyi, do you think this investigation will restore confidence in the people who voted the ANC into power and the people who trusted the ANC to do good when it comes to something like this COVID-19 pandemic? Or do you think once people are actually put behind bars, that's when the confidence will be restored?
I think that, some may be convinced and some will not be. I think politically we must look at what's happening right now in terms of the timeline and how close we are to the 2021 local government elections. If you look at how government or how political parties act when it's close to election time, that's when they get into gear and they're seen to be acting and they're seen to be doing something in a bid to appease the electoral. And that in South Africa we are having an electoral system that works on a constituency. In other words, you need supporters, you need voters. Without those, you really have nothing. There is no ANC without the voters that put them in power. There is no EFF or DA or any other political party without a constituent that put them into power, that they are supposedly representing the parliament. Now, I think that's called corruption to be dealt with within the ranks of the ANC, has been there for a very long time. And it may be interesting to see how people like Premier Makhura say it's time for people to stealing public funds. But they are stealing public funds for a long time. irregularities for a long time. Why now? What is different now? Is it because COVID-19 is topical? Is it because the local government elections are around the corner? And on the point, actually, there was some debate from June about whether local government elections should be postponed to 2024. And according to the Electoral Act, government or the IEC had up to 90 days to postpone the elections after the dates that were supposed to be had. But beyond that, it has to go to the electoral court. But that's another process altogether. I think the point I'm trying to drive at is this a case of the ANC trying to clean up its act prior to the election so that they can stand on good footing when campaign time comes, so that they can preach the good news to say, look at what we've done? Or is this really the ANC turning over a new leaf? Is this genuine? That's what I'm driving at. Is this genuine? Is this something that we can trust? Only time will tell.
Now, my next question is, it's just painting a scenario here. If money wasn't allegedly looted and new companies registered as the COVID-19 relief money was released, and everything was given to companies that deserved to receive the money and provide PPEs, etc., do you think Gauteng wouldn't have been the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I don't know if that would have been the case, but what I do know is that had the monies been used correctly and for the purpose for which they were sent out, that would have actually been the perfect time for the ANC to show its capability in a time of crisis. Because this is really the time where we needed leadership, where we needed, the ANC to lead and guide us as a country. And I think for the most part, if we look at the work of Health Minister Willem Kize, he's done a fantastic job in terms of keeping us informed, in terms of keeping up with the testing and releasing daily stats, in terms of the president himself, offering guidance, starting, in the early days of the pandemic, March up until now. I think this has really been a big blow to the ruling party, who, for the most part, have been doing really well in managing this pandemic. This has just really struck that blow that's going to make people forget all the good that they've done and really just focus, on what has happened now. And rightfully so. It really boggles the mind that there are individuals who harbor such deep levels of grief that in a time of a pandemic where many families and individuals have lost their income, have lost, their sense of independence, that, money that was supposed to go towards helping the most vulnerable of our society with food parcels, with, special grants, all the things that the government has announced. The money that's been siphoned out of government is money that was supposed to go towards that. People don't not just, only recipients or what was going to be provided to states, but it's a whole other services that were meant to be assisting the most vulnerable. And now those people may not even get those services because money has been siphoned out of the public purse. And that, for me, I think is the real tragedy here. The lack of human empathy and the lack of human compassion. And, it just speaks to the saying that, absolute power corrupts, but absolutely. And we've seen that we've reached unprecedented levels of corruption in South Africa. And so really, the president and his cabinet have a really tough job ahead of them.
Khanyi, what would the ideal punishment be for those that are found guilty of looting or misappropriating funds that were meant to help people, but instead used to fill up their pockets?
Prosecution, successful prosecutions. I mean, we know that every crime has a correlating fine or jail term. I think that what will really be befitting is, number one, they need to be removed from their positions, whether it's within a political party or within a government department or an position, whatever the case may be. But successful convictions, it's really important to individuals who are now sitting behind bars, a criminal record to their name, that because it stands out to be a message that it is no longer business as usual, that if you do the time, you will do the time. And it's also going to send out the message that the South African government is no longer going to allow, the tender bonanza to continue. And of course, we know that Finance Minister Tito Mboweni himself has, stopped the tender bonanza in its track. He has stopped the emergency, procurement process, which created the gap in the very first place for the 2.2 billion rand contracts in Gauteng alone to be awarded within a very short space of time. In this case, as an example, we know that the alleged contract that the dispute was awarded within a week, just 5 days. Those just sent out, they sent in their codes, within days, equipment letters issued, and those processes that take months usually to happen. Evaluations and a number of other processes, but all of them allowed because of the emergency situation that we were in, and many individuals took advantage of that, unfortunately.
All right, Khanyi, just like you said, if you do the time, you got to do the crime. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it right there. The connection seems to be having a bit of trouble, but it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Khanyi Magibane, political analyst. She's been speaking to us about the PPE and COVID-19 corruption investigations and the Gauteng Department of Health, and where to from now after the Premier himself, David Makhura, said at least 10 of his MECs as well as him are going under a lifestyle audit. We'll get weekly updates, so we'll of course be chatting to Khanyi Magibane throughout this period to find out how things work out and if they'll really pan out, and if, Khanyi mentioned, if they'll serve the time. Prosecution is probably the best way to be able to restore confidence within the ANC or within the people of South Africa.